I never believed this could happen until it happened to my daughter. Dear beloved ones, my name is Lena Matthews. I'm not a preacher or a prophet. I'm just a mother whose 13-year-old daughter, Hope, died in front of hundreds of people at her school play. Doctors said her brain simply shut down, but 7 minutes later, she came back, and what she said next shook our family to the core. Hope saw Jesus. She was taken beyond the veil, and she came back with a message that terrified her and stunned me. I've promised to share her story with the world, and now it's time I kept that promise. I didn't know heaven was waiting while I packed her lunch. That morning started like any other. The sun was shining through the kitchen window, catching the dust in the air just right. I was cutting strawberries. Hope came down the stairs in her school play costume, a little angel robe with gold trim, for the role she was so proud of. Do I look like heaven's assistant? She joked, twirling. I smiled, not knowing those words would become prophetic. I drove her to school. We sang in the car. She asked me if angels have names. I said, of course they do. That would be the last normal conversation we had. Hours later, while at work, I got the call every parent dreads. The school secretary's voice was shaking. Lena. Hope collapsed on stage during the performance. Paramedics are here. You need to come right now. My legs buckled. By the time I reached the hospital, they were working on her. Tubes, machines, code blue. They wouldn't let me in. I pressed my face to the cold hallway wall and whispered, God, don't take her. Please, don't take my baby. 7 minutes. They said her brain had no activity for 7 minutes. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember crying. Just stillness, like the world had pressed pause. And then, shouting. Alarms. A nurse ran out. She's back, she yelled. We have a pulse. When I walked into that room, I saw something that even now I struggle to explain. Hope was breathing. But her eyes, they looked like she had stared into something beyond this world. She reached for my hand, trembling, and whispered something that didn't make sense. Mom. He said the children are crying in the dark. She had no idea she was walking into death, dressed like an angel. The school auditorium was full. Parents were filming. Kids were whispering behind the curtains. Hope had waited months for this moment. She was playing the archangel who announces good news in the school's Easter play. She even wrote her own lines, adding something about love never dying. She walked onto the stage with a glow I will never forget. Halfway through the second act, it happened. Her teacher told me later that Hope suddenly stopped speaking. She blinked, looked up toward the ceiling as if hearing something, then fell straight backward, striking the floor with a sound that made people scream. The auditorium went dead silent. A few kids thought it was part of the show until they saw the teachers running, a parent yelling, and the curtains closing. A 13-year-old girl collapsed in front of an entire audience, not from fear or nerves, but from a ruptured brain aneurysm that no one, not even doctors, knew existed. No warning signs, no symptoms, just gone. At the hospital, they told me she had no oxygen to her brain for over 7 minutes. Most people don't come back from that. And if they do, they aren't the same. But Hope wasn't most people. When she came back, she didn't even ask where she was. She just said one thing over and over again, with eyes filled with something ancient. He let me see the edge of time, Mom. It's real. It's all real." There was no warning, no pain, just a pull, like my soul was being unzipped from my body. That's how Hope described it to me later. She said one moment she was on stage, about to speak her line, and the next, something yanked her consciousness out of her chest. She didn't remember falling. She didn't even feel afraid. She just felt released. She told me it was like her body became distant, like a coat she suddenly grew out of. "I heard people yelling, Mom," she said, "but it sounded far away. I saw you, even though you weren't there yet. I saw your car speeding to the hospital. I saw Dad crying at his work desk even before he knew anything was wrong." Doctors were stunned she remembered anything at all. But the things she described, no one could explain. She told me she floated above her own body and saw her teacher crying, kneeling next to her. She saw her own face, pale, eyes open, but not seeing. She wasn't afraid. She said it felt peaceful, but strange. Like I didn't belong to gravity anymore. But then came the moment everything changed. Hope said she felt something, like a vibration, a sound that wasn't a sound, calling her, not with words, but with truth. It pulled her toward what she described as a seam in the sky, a rip in reality itself. And when she passed through it, she wasn't in this world anymore. She had crossed over. Time didn't stop. It surrendered. That's what Hope said to me when I asked her what she saw on the other side. She said that the very moment her soul left the boundaries of her body, time began to lose its meaning. Not in a foggy, dream-like way, but like time was kneeling, pausing to let her pass. She saw colors she had no names for. She said it wasn't just seeing, it was feeling light. Each color had emotion, each shape had music, and yet none of it had substance in the way we understand it. Hope described it like this: imagine floating in a place where you're not sure if you're in a dream or a memory, but it's realer than anything you've ever touched. She felt herself moving towards something immense, a consciousness so vast and gentle it made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. And then came the silence, not empty, not cold, but sacred. Time stopped trying to move. It wasn't counting seconds anymore. She said it felt like being inside the pause between two heartbeats, if that pause had a name and knew your entire soul. Hope described that moment with tears in her eyes. "I wasn't scared, Mom. I just knew I was part of something I didn't understand yet, and I wasn't alone." That's when the presence appeared. Not walking, not glowing, just being. A love that could shatter mountains with a whisper, but instead gently said, "Hope." She looked at me after saying that and whispered, "Jesus said my name, Mom. He said my name, and everything inside me bowed." She didn't step into death. She was carried through it. Hope told me that she didn't walk into heaven. She said something, no, someone, carried her across. She described it like drifting weightlessly into a current that knew exactly where she belonged, not like floating in water, but like being remembered by the universe. She said it was like something huge had always been waiting for me, and when I left my body, it finally had permission to reach me. She didn't pass through a tunnel like you hear in other stories. She said she passed through a veil of memory, a shimmering curtain where every choice she ever made played out like waves of light, not as guilt or shame, but as a realization. Every word, every act of kindness, every quiet moment mattered more than we know. Then came a moment where the light itself opened, and she was on what she called the golden floor. It wasn't gold like jewelry, but like pure energy, a surface that shimmered with thought. And standing there, at the edge of something infinite, was a being of light so bright she couldn't even look directly at him, until he called her by name. That's when she said the sky breathed. "Hope," he said, and the entire space echoed with that single word. Not just her name, but her essence, like Jesus was calling every part of who she was into alignment with something divine. Then she told me something I'll never forget. "Mom, I didn't feel like I was dead. I felt more alive than I ever was." Before the light, there was something else, and it scared her. Hope hesitated to tell me this part. She kept playing with her hospital wristband, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I should say this, Mom. It wasn't all beautiful at first." She said that before she met Jesus, before the golden light, she passed through what she described as the silent dark. It wasn't hell, she clarified. It wasn't evil. It was emptiness, a void, a space that felt like time had failed to be born there. No sound, no up or down, no past or future. It was like floating inside a question no one wanted to answer, she said. And here's the thing that sent chills down my back. She heard crying, not with her ears, but in her soul. Hope said it was the sound of children crying, but not with sadness, with confusion. They didn't know where they were, she told me. They weren't bad. They were forgotten, unprayed for. That's what she called them. Unprayed for children. She said it like she had been given a vocabulary from beyond. Then came a moment of panic, even in her soul form. "I wasn't sure if I was stuck there forever," she whispered. "That's when I called out for him, not with words, but with my heart. And the moment I did, the dark cracked. Like lightning splitting a black sky, a single beam of light came ripping through the void, and she was drawn toward it. I didn't walk to it, Mom. I was pulled like the light was a magnet, and I was a whisper made of dust." Then came the peace, the warmth, and the awareness that she was not alone anymore. She met Jesus before she even knew she was searching for him. Hope said when the light fully surrounded her, she realized it wasn't just light. It was him, Jesus. She said he didn't appear as a man at first. He was like a presence that remembered everything about her and loved every part of it. Before I saw his face, I felt his memory of me. When she finally saw him fully, she didn't describe him like pictures or statues. She said he looked like truth wearing a body. His eyes, Mom, they didn't look at me. They read me, but not in a judging way. It was like he was looking at who I was before I was born. She said he was smiling, not with amusement, but with the deepest joy she'd ever felt. It was the kind of smile that makes flowers grow. Then Jesus spoke. "You are seen," he told her. "Even when you think you're invisible, even when you're quiet in the night and wonder if I'm real, I am there." Hope said she felt everything in her being light up. Like his words weren't just words, they were architecture, rebuilding parts of her that had been tired or afraid. She asked him, "Why did I have to die to see you?" He answered, "You were never dead. You were just finally still enough to hear me." Then he showed her something, a mirror made of light, not to show her face, but to show her impact. Every time she had smiled at someone, stood up for a friend, or prayed in her room, it showed up in the mirror as bursts of color on a map of the world. Hope looked at me in the hospital bed and said, "Mom, I saw what a single prayer does. It doesn't disappear. It lives." He looked like the answer to every question I never asked. Hope tried to describe Jesus' appearance, but said human words fall short. Still, she tried for me, for us, so we could know. "He had a face," she said, "but not the way we do. It changed with his emotion. It became more beautiful the more he spoke. His eyes, they had stars in them like actual galaxies, but they looked straight into me and made me feel safe. His hair flowed like waves of sunlight and night mixed together. His robe looked like it was made of time. Hope said every thread shimmered with moments of love, sacrifice, and eternity. But it was his hands that made her cry. She saw the wounds, still there, still shining. He carries his love like scars, she told me, and he doesn't hide them. She said he reached out his hand to her, and when he touched her, she remembered everything good all at once. Birthdays, hugs, bedtime stories, the sound of rain, my laugh, her favorite song. All of it was in his hand, Mom. It was like his fingerprints had been on my life since before I was born. She asked him, "Why do you still have the marks?" Jesus replied, "Because they're not wounds anymore. They are openings where the world can still touch heaven." Hope wept as she said this to me, not because she was afraid, but because she missed him. She had seen him. She had been touched by love that made the universe tremble. She said he smelled like fresh rain and something she called first light. I asked her what that meant. She smiled and whispered, "The smell of when the sun first learns how to rise." She didn't ask where she was. She asked who she was. When Hope stood before Jesus, her first words weren't what you'd expect from a 13-year-old. She didn't ask, "Am I dead?" or "Where am I?" What she asked was this: "Was I ever really alive?" Jesus didn't seem surprised. He looked at her with the kind of love that makes walls fall down inside you, and he said, "You were always alive, but now you are aware." Hope said that in that moment, everything she thought she knew about herself, her age, her name, her grades, her fears, peeled away like old leaves in spring. What was left was her soul, glowing and alive and known. She looked down at herself and realized she had no body in the earthly sense, but she still had form, a shape made of light. She told me, "Mom, I was made of music." Like my whole being was a song only he could hear completely. Then she did something that shattered me. She reached out to touch him and then froze. She told me I didn't feel worthy to touch Jesus. But before her fear could rise, he stepped forward and took her hand. "Hope," he said, "you are not here because you earned it. You are here because I love you. That has always been enough." She cried as she told me that. She said, "It was the first time I didn't feel small in a big world. I felt held in something larger than time." And then he asked her a question. "Would you like to see what I see?" That's when everything changed. He let her see Earth, not from above, but from behind the veil. Hope said Jesus took her to what looked like a platform of light, suspended over a living map. But this wasn't just Earth. It was the soul of Earth, a glowing sphere wrapped in threads of light, energy, and movement. Every prayer, every thought, every act of kindness or cruelty, it all left spiritual footprints. She said Earth looked tired, not dirty, not evil, just burdened, like it was carrying too much pain without enough love to balance it. There were places that sparkled with light, she said, like cities of kindness, prayers, and compassion. But there were also dark patches, and those weren't evil, Mom. They were forgotten. Hope told me Jesus showed her how every human life creates impact beyond what we see. A smile can ignite healing. A cruel word can scar generations. And prayers? She said they rise like golden threads, some so bright they can pierce through the darkest space. Then he showed her something that stunned her. She saw me praying in our kitchen, crying into the dishwater after her collapse. And she saw that moment from his eyes. She said, "Mom, when you whispered my name, Jesus lit up, like your love charged heaven." I fell apart hearing that. Jesus told her, "Tell them, Earth isn't dying. It's longing for love, for light, for remembrance." And she realized the Earth isn't waiting to be saved by a miracle. It's waiting to be remembered by its children. Some children carry more light than others, and it's not by accident. Hope told me that Jesus showed her something she never expected to understand at 13. She said, "There are children on earth who don't know they're chosen, but they are. Not chosen to be better, chosen to carry something." She called them light bearers. Kids who cry at night and don't know why. Children who feel like they don't belong. The ones who talk to God in whispers, not because they're told to, but because their hearts just ache for something more. Jesus told her that these children are not broken. They are guardians in disguise. They were born with extra memory, he said. Memory of heaven. And that memory makes them sensitive, but also powerful. Hope said she saw kids just like her all over the world. Some in wheelchairs, some bullied, some quiet and shy, some full of fire and rebellion. All of them glowing with a flicker of divine fire, even if they didn't know it. Jesus told her they are not to be medicated into silence. They are to be taught how to remember who they are. And then he said something that chilled me. If the world silences them, it silences its last line of defense. Hope looked at me and said, "Mom, I was shown that chosen kids aren't meant to fit in. We're meant to help the world remember what heaven feels like." And then she whispered, "That's why so many of us feel alone. The enemy wants us isolated before we realize who we are." I didn't have any words, only tears. She said Jesus gave her a message for the parents, and it terrified her to speak it. Hope told me that toward the end of her encounter, Jesus turned to her with sorrow in his eyes, not because of wrath, but because of how many parents have forgotten their power. She said he showed her homes filled with noise, phones buzzing, TVs blaring, dinner tables silent. He showed her children crying silently in rooms, longing for someone to see their souls. Parents are the first prophets a child hears, Jesus said. When they stop speaking life, the world steps in and speaks lies. Hope said she saw how many children were being spiritually abandoned, even in good homes, not out of cruelty, but out of distraction. Fatigue, fear, disconnection. She told me, Jesus said too many parents are feeding their kids everything but their spiritual identity. They teach them sports, grades, success, but not how to stand in the light. He told her, if parents don't tell them who they are, the world will tell them who they are not. Hope began to cry in the hospital as she recalled this. She said, "Mom, it scared me, because I saw kids growing up empty, while their parents thought they were doing everything right." But Jesus didn't just leave it as a warning. He gave hope. He showed her that even one parent who prays over their child at night creates a ripple so strong it can alter the course of that child's life. He said, even if you never get it all right, if you love them in my name, I will cover what you missed. And that's when Hope grabbed my hand and said, promise me you'll tell the parents, Mom. Tell them their love still reaches heaven. She heard screams, but they weren't from where you'd expect. Hope hesitated when she told me this part. Her voice got quiet. Her hands started to shake a little. Mom, this part isn't easy to say. I didn't want to remember it. She said after Jesus showed her the earth and the children who are chosen, there was a moment of deep stillness. Then he took her by the hand and said, now you must see what happens when light is ignored. That's when they moved, not walked, but shifted into a realm she called the in-between. It wasn't hell, but it was where souls cried out to be seen. I heard screaming, she whispered, but not from people being punished. It was from people who never believed they mattered. Their cries weren't angry, they were empty. She said it was like their souls were echoing with the regret of never having been told they were loved. Hope said she saw people who had spent their whole lives chasing things, money, image, approval, and now they were in a place where none of it followed them. All that remained was silence and the sound of their own unspoken prayers. Jesus wept. He wasn't mad at them, Mom, she said. He was devastated. She asked him, can they get out? He looked at her gently and said, love never forgets, and as long as one person prays for them, hope still exists. Hope told me this place is why prayer matters more than anything. Some people, she said, are hanging on by the thin thread of someone else's faith. I've never forgotten those words. She said time isn't what we think, and Jesus proved it. Hope told me that after the screams faded and Jesus brought her peace again, he showed her something that bent her mind. He took me to what looked like a living wheel, she said. It spun, but not in circles, in layers, like dimensions of time stacked on top of each other. Hope realized that what we call past, present, and future was just one slice of something far greater. And then Jesus said something incredible. Time is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Hope said she saw her own life play out in strands of light, but here's the part that took my breath away. She saw possible futures too. Every choice, Mom, every moment where I chose love instead of fear, created an entirely new ripple. I saw what could have happened if I stopped praying. I saw what could have happened if you hadn't believed. She asked Jesus, which future is the real one? He smiled and said, the one you align your heart with in faith. You're not trapped in time. Time is waiting for your decision. Hope said she saw prayers that hadn't been answered yet, not because God didn't hear them, but because the person praying had given up before the seed broke ground. She begged me, Mom, tell people that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Some miracles are already on the way. We just quit watching the road. Her tears said what words couldn't. She begged to stay, but he said her mission wasn't finished. Hope looked at me one night, weeks after the hospital, and said, Mom, I didn't want to come back. That shattered me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't tired. I wasn't even afraid. I just didn't want to leave him, she whispered. She told me that after all the visions, the earth, the children, the souls crying out, the future paths, Jesus held her hands and looked at her with eyes that contained every star ever born. He said, you have seen. Now you must speak. Hope asked, but who will believe me? I'm just a kid. He said, that's why they'll believe you. The world has heard too many voices. They need to hear one without pride, without agenda, only truth. Then she said something that made my knees buckle. Jesus showed me a vision of myself, grown up, standing in front of crowds. But I wasn't famous. I was urgent, like a fire was in me. She paused, and I think that fire is already starting to burn. She begged Jesus to let her stay. She said she clung to him like a child hugging their father before school. But then he gently put his hand on her heart and said, you were born for this. Go back, wake the world up. And just like that, she was falling, back through light, back through time, back into her broken body, where pain waited like a door slammed shut. She came back with words no one expected, not even the doctors. When Hope woke up in the hospital, I was by her side. Machines beeped. Nurses held their breath. The doctor whispered, if she speaks, it will be a miracle. And then, as if heaven had never left her lips, she opened her mouth and said, the veil is real, and we have so little time. We all froze. I thought she was delirious, but her eyes, they were clearer than ever. It was as if she had brought eternity back with her. She looked at her nurse and said, you need to call your father. He's been crying about you not forgiving him. The nurse dropped her chart. She looked at the doctor and said, check the man in room 202 again. His artery is about to burst. Within minutes, a code was called for that exact room. That man survived. But what she said next was the real reason I'm writing to you. She grabbed my hand and said, Mom, tell them not to waste their days. Tell them God isn't hiding. He's waiting. She looked out the window and whispered, the world is about to shift. People need to start listening to heaven again. Since then, she's changed. She prays longer, sleeps less. She sees things I can't. She once told me the angels are louder at 3:33 in the morning. That's when the veil is the thinnest. Even her voice is different now. Slower, wiser. The doctors said she's recovering beyond explanation. But I know the truth. She didn't just survive death. She came back carrying messages too big for her small frame. And still she smiles. Because she says she can still feel his hand on her heart. She came back glowing, and I don't just mean spiritually. Since Hope returned from the edge of eternity, she's never quite been the same. It's not just her words. It's her presence. There's something different about how the air feels around her. Softer, quieter, reverent. As if heaven still clings to her skin. The first time I really noticed was when our cat, Maisie, who had always been skittish, curled up on Hope's chest and didn't move for hours. Animals sense things. And Maisie? She acted like she was laying in sunlight again after years of winter. Hope doesn't walk into rooms the same way anymore. She doesn't demand attention, but people turn toward her without knowing why. I've seen grown men tear up just listening to her hum. And her eyes, they have a clarity that unsettles some adults. It's not defiant. It's aware. She sees through people, not in judgment, but with gentle knowing. She told me one night, Mom, I still feel the music sometimes. In dreams, or when it's quiet. Like heaven's trying to remind me I didn't imagine it. She hears things before they happen. She finishes my sentences before I say them. Once she walked into church during worship and whispered to the pastor, there's someone in the back row praying for healing in their spine. That man came forward in tears. He had a spinal injury from war. He'd never told a soul. Hope didn't take credit. She just closed her eyes and said, Jesus still remembers him. We used to call her imaginative. Now I call her marked. She walks through this world as someone who has seen what waits beyond it. But she carries it quietly, with reverence. She once told me, it's not for showing off. It's for calling people home. And I believe her. Because sometimes when I tuck her in, I see her lips moving. She's praying for people she's never met. People she says are walking too close to the edge. I promised God if He gave her back, I would give her story to the world. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a preacher. I'm not anyone special. I'm just a mother who stood in a hallway while doctors tried to restart her daughter's heart and begged God not to let my child go. And He answered, but not in the way I expected. He didn't just give me back hope. He gave me a messenger. Hope has since returned to school, but she isn't the same. She listens more. She talks less. Her teachers say she writes things that don't sound like a 13-year-old wrote them. One of them asked if I helped her with her essays. I didn't. Hope writes with a fire that didn't exist before. A certainty. She tells me heaven is counting on people like me, people like you, to start taking prayer seriously again, to stop filling silence with noise, to start looking at our children and asking, who are you? What are you carrying? And she told me something that moved me to tears. Jesus said if my story is shared, someone will choose life who is ready to give up. So here I am, writing this, to you, to the person who's tired, to the one who doesn't believe anymore, to the parent wondering if their prayers matter, to the teenager who thinks nobody sees them, to the one on the edge. Hope came back from death to tell you, He sees you, He loves you, and it's not too late. Maybe you don't believe me. That's okay. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't lived it. But I did. We did. So now I keep my promise. This is her story. But maybe it's yours too. Because you're reading this for a reason. And heaven is listening. Right now.